Hello, welcome to biology lesson 4.03 on chloroplast and mitochondria. These guys are both organelles. So we are talking about organelles, and this is the number 3, the third and the fourth organelle we've talked about. Do you remember the first two? So the first two were the cell membrane, and then we talked about microfilaments, which are part of the skeleton or the cytoskeleton, the cell skeleton. So those were the first two organelles that we talked about. This guy is our chloroplast. And this is our mitochondria. Mitochondria are found in most, almost all organisms, but especially in eukaryotes. So even plants have mitochondria. Found in eukaryotes. Chloroplasts are found in photoautotrophs. Found in photoautotrophs. And the chloroplast is what allows the photoautotrophs to turn sunlight into glucose, which is a pretty incredible, sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water. Well, what we're going to do is we're not going to worry so much about the structure of mitochondria, but we are going to learn about the structure of the chloroplast because we're going to talk about these different sections. Before we do that, let's write down, this is the location for photosynthesis. And this is the location for cell respiration. It's the last lesson we talked about cellular respiration. We're just going to call it cell respiration. Whoops, get my whiteout eraser location. For cell respiration, I'm just going to abbreviate that because I'll run out of room. All right, well, let's start off with the parts. So you're going to notice the one thing I am going to do is I'm going to, in red on both of these structures, we have this first arrow is pointing to, there's two layers here. Notice we have two. We have an outer line here, and we have an outer line here. And then in blue, I'm gonna color the inner line. I have an outer line and I have an inner line. Many of you noticed I'm left-handed by this point in time. The inner line over on this side is a little different because it gets folded all up. See that? The red is the outer membrane. Outer membrane. And the blue is the inner membrane. Well, how do organelles end up with two membranes? That's kind of weird. We won't see this in any other organelles, and we're going to talk about that at the end of the video. Another thing that, so we're going to talk about in chloroplast, you see each of these stacks, they look like somebody cut a dime in half. These individual stacks, so, oh, by the way, since we're doing That's pointing to the outer membrane, and that's pointing to the inner membrane. So each one of these individual stacks is called a thylakoid. It is spelled Thylakoid. These are the membrane discs. Membrane discs. If I put a bunch of these together, so this circle is indicating I've got 1, 2, 3 thylakoids. That's called a granum. Granum. A granum is a stack of thylakoids. Stack of thylakoids. By the way, plural for that is grana. So if I was talking about this granum and this granum and this granum, it would be grana. All right, finally, I have got fluid that fills the area between the inner membrane and all of these grana and thylakoids, and that's called the stroma. And that's the fluid that surrounds the thylakoids. So there's a fluid. And what we're going to see is that photosynthesis takes place. Certain parts take place here, and certain parts take place here. And so if I tell you that the light reactions take place in the thylakoid membrane, and you don't know what a thylakoid is, you're going to be a little bit lost. Same way with if I say the dark reactions or the Calvin cycle takes place in the stroma, you've got to know where the stroma is. The only thing on the mitochondria that I want to point out is that the folds are called cristae, Cristae. You might see that term once in a while. So remember, cell respiration is about making ATP. And photosynthesis is about making glucose. So these are pretty kind of advanced processes. You won't find an organelle that's quite as complex as a chloroplast and a mitochondria. And the fact that they have two membranes really kind of made scientists wonder. Well, I think it was back in the 60s or 70s. There was a scientist, and I think her name was Margulis, not quite sure. She came up with this, what's called endosymbiotic theory. So hopefully from your vocabulary, you know that endo means inside or within. And symbio means something that's symbiotic is, so for example, if you tutored somebody to get a better score in math, and if you're a little young little lady and you tutor a great big football player, you're getting picked on, you tutor him so he gets a better score in math and he protects you from the bullies taking your lunch money. That's symbiosis. A clownfish living inside of an anemone, it cleans the anemone and the anemone protects the clownfish. That's symbiosis. So symbiosis is when both parties benefit. And this is what they think happened. So they think a long time ago, you had two kind of prokaryotic cells. We'll call this cell one, like thing one, thing two. And we'll call this cell two. They think that chloroplasts and mitochondria are like cell two, and that early on they were free living. They could live on their own. At some point, do you remember phagocytosis? So at some point, cell one engulfed cell two and took it into itself, but didn't destroy it. So now we've got this more complex cell floating around, and cell two is now not just inside it, but living inside of it. So think about what would happen. Remember how I did blue and red, inner membrane, outer membrane? As this comes around and this pinches off, it's going to leave it. Remember how everything's inside a vesicle? The vesicle would have been the outer membrane, and the inner membrane was the original cell membrane for this, what was used to be a free living organism. So now, where does the symbiosis come into play? What has now become an organelle, because they can't live on their own, they do things for the cell like make glucose or make ATP, but they don't have to worry about getting their own nutrition. The cell provides that. Well, here's the kicker. The other thing is these guys have their own genetic information. So we have mitochondrial RNA, and we have genetic information inside the chloroplast. So we can actually track somebody through their RNA in their mitochondria. So that's another proof. So we'll sum up our proof on the summary for the video. So what were we trying to do with this video? The first thing we wanted to do was to learn the parts of, so the anatomy of our two structures. You should be able to know the thylakoid membranes, granum, inner membrane, outer membrane, and their general function. Gen function. Function. So their location found in the photoautotrophs, and this carries out photosynthesis. This carries out cell respiration. Our third thing then is the endosymbiotic theory. How did these guys get together? And our proof for this, so proof A is that we have an inner and outer membrane. Proof B is that they have their own genetic information. So that's what we were looking at in this video. Thanks for watching, and have a good day.